Welcome to It's All Connected with Cinthia Varkevisser and Michelle Walters. Michelle's taking a day off today, so I thought it would be a really good time to reconnect with my pal, Stephanie Lueras. Now, you may remember her from episode 10 when we talked about healing souls with souls. And we had a really good time talking about health and healing and how you went from working in the ministry to having your own business and helping people with health. So, from this place, I re-invited or invited back Stephanie Lueras to talk about a different thing. I find that she's a very data-driven, faith-based person, and I find her so fascinating. Fascinating. So, back by popular demand, Stephanie Lueras.
Yay, I'm so excited to be back with you.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing this with me. So we were hanging out and talking, and I forgot what we were talking about. But every time I pose a question, you always have data-driven information, and then you tell me what would be best for me. And of course, the choice is always mine, right?
Mhm.
And I am not so data driven. I am actually more intuitive driven. And then I have to check out my information. So I'm a little bit backwards. So I find you and Michelle Walters fascinating because you're data driven, especially since you are so devoted in your faith that I was wondering what's it like to be a science driven Christian? And what's that like? Have you run into problems? What's that like? What's your daily life like? What's it like with other people when they find out that you're science driven?
Well, quite honestly, the you don't find the thing this place very often, and you butt a lot of heads. Um, and a lot of it comes back to my personal faith journey. I was a person that was brought up in the church. I was raised in the church. You always went to church. You didn't really question what you believed. And as I got older, that didn't quite sit well with me. And as I got into high school and college, like that just rubbed me wrong. And I got to this place in college where the questions that I was asking, I wasn't getting the satisfactory answers to
Right.
my questions. And being the jerk of a college student I was, well, you're not going to answer my questions. And I'm looking around in, being a cliquey college student, if this is what the church is, just this place to come hang out, well, I don't really want to be a part of it.
Right.
And in my head, equating this is the church, well, then this is God, well, then this isn't God. And so swear it all off, I'm going to go out on the great spiritual quest. And so for the next several years, I looked at a lot of different religions, like literally sat in the library, sat in bookstores, exploring, what do people believe? What do all these other faiths believe?
Mm-hmm.
And what fits, and explored and tried to find a place in some different spiritual paths. And some things fit for a little bit. Found some friendships, found some places that I could hang out for a little while, but it didn't quite fit. And as I got towards the end of college, it was actually through my job that I ended up being invited back to church. And it was a place where it was safe to start asking questions again. And in that, asking the questions and starting to get the answers. And like you said, you get you're good with that intuition, you're good with that feeling. I don't get the feeling until after I have the answers. If I feel solid in the answers, if I feel rooted in that something is good, something is satisfactory, something has checked all the boxes, then I, as myself, am open to whatever it is that's going to come in and say, yeah, this is great. No, it isn't. But I have to have the information first.
Right.
That whole trust but verify thing. And I think that for me, that's what's made my faith so much stronger, is the fact that I've spent the time doing the work and really digging in, really learning, really understanding what it is that I believe, what it is that I hold firm on, and that it's just not feeling.
Right.
That there's something concrete that I can go back and prove.
Right.
And it goes back with everything I do in my work, in the everyday. Like one of the really big arguments that comes up a lot is, well, how can you be a Christian and practice yoga?
Right. So interesting to me because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't
Yeah.
make sense.
And do I practice yoga at its very root? Do I get in touch with certain aspects of it? Probably not as deep as a lot of other people. Could I say 100%? No. But do I understand the roots of yoga? Do I respect it? Absolutely, because I understand where it comes from. I understand its history. I understand the different types, the different ways that we come about it. And also there's the physical mechanics to it as well, and how our body reacts within that practice to it. And so if I'm having a physical reaction to a spiritual practice, whether or not I'm worshiping this or that can be honored in a very different way.
Right. Right. That's a great answer because you bring up the idea that if you're strong in your faith, that you can respect other faiths because you're so deep in your roots that you can understand the the feeling of other people who are very rooted in their faith as well.
Right.
Right? And that's where a lot of respect comes from the deeper that you dig, and that when you see someone that digs that deep as well, that there's a mutual respect because that's not easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I totally understand that. The thing that I find interesting is that a lot of people, I don't know if it's cultural or not, they're either or. And even at one point, you were talking about either or.
Mm-hmm.
So that you had to answer your own questions to satisfy yourself, right? To come back to your faith. Have you met other people who are still either or? And, what are those conversations like?
I think the either or is sometimes a personality thing, that we almost have to get to that point in ourselves to be okay living in some gray. And we all have black and white thinking to some level. And for me, when I look at my understanding of science, when I look at my understanding of the world as we know it, the human body, the more I learn, the deeper I understand it, the more I realize I don't know. And that parallels faith in so many ways. In Catholicism, the Latin term is ad mysterium. That, you know, there's this place, this stuff that we just don't know, that there's not the words, that it is. Like, you know, you think about the afterlife, you think about, you know, the next life, you think about heaven. We know it's going to be so great and grand, but there's not the words to explain it. Like, it's the mystery. And like, that's how I kind of liken that parallel with science. The more I learn about, the more I realize I don't know, the more I'm fascinated about what is created, because I can't fathom how all of this is put together and works together in creation. Like, just, you look at the human body itself, like, that just didn't randomly appear one day.
Right. Right. I know I try to celebrate this miracle called my body, which you see at 6:30 in the morning is not really celebrated. And it's hard to go to the beauty and the mystery and the magic and the miracle of being alive and, you know, walking and being able to do all these things. And I think that's why I like intuition so much, because to me that's like having a miracle every time.
Mhm.
It's it's not trust, it's not, what is it that you said? Believe and verify, trust but verify.
Mhm.
It's almost like trust trust and see what happens. There's nothing to
Mhm.
ver. I mean, because you can't verify, you just see what happens, right?
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a thing. The what I find really interesting is that there are a lot of people who are deeply rooted in their science. And I think about engineers a lot because, believe it or not, they're the hardest people for me to communicate with. And it's just a form of expression, right? The way that they express themselves is A to B to C to D, and then summing up, where I'm A to D, B, maybe I get to C, maybe not, and then ta-da, here's my conclusion.
Mhm.
The thing that I find very interesting is that sometimes it's the science that, I won't say it gets in the way with faith, but it has a way of questioning that doesn't bring them back to faith. And for those people, I mean, that may be their faith, right? Science may be their
Mhm.
faith. That's a really good, that's a
Yeah.
really good place to be, right? There's no judgment around that. But for people who are struggling, what would you say?
And sometimes, you know, you using that science in search of the faith, you search so hard, you never find that endpoint. Because, like, my thing is prove it. You know, prove it to me. You can find the answers in science. Like, you know, you want to find if something exists or something happens, or, you know, XYZ, you know, you can find, you know, definitively the answer. You know, that is that not the idea of the scientific process? But sometimes, you know, that's also, you know, where you get hung up is, well, I'm going to continue to try to prove it wrong, instead of, no, we keep coming to this point where, no, it really is true.
Right, right. I like to think that sometimes, even with engineers, there is a leap of faith
Mhm.
where it's not just a logical next step, and that in itself is a miracle, or it's a, you're using your faith to take that little leap. And I always find it interesting that, now I'm making a generalization, that a lot of times people will say, well, that was just this. And I find that a little bit interesting as well. That's just not anything to comment on, just kind of a weird little observation. So let the audience remember that they are listening to It's All Connected with Cinthia Varkevisser and Michelle Walters, and we're here with Stephanie Lueras, not as the business owner of, oh my gosh, I forgot the name of your company.
Heart and Soul Fitness and Wellness.
Okay, stop right here. So, and we're here with Stephanie Lueras of Heart and Soul Fitness and Wellness. So let's continue with this. I'm wondering if you've run into any kind of conflicts, or do you believe we're in the trend of more people becoming and rather than either or?
It's hard to say, because in the information age, there's so much misinformation. We take hold of the information we want to believe, and it's also a question is that information true or not? And that's where the rub comes.
Right.
And that's really one of my soapbox places that I get going sometimes on the science side is what you're looking at actually the truth?
Gotcha.
And how do you determine that?
Right. Well, how do you determine that, Stephanie?
Well, it really depends on kind of, the area in what you're looking at, what it is that you're determining. But like, say you've picked up an article, say you're picking up a study. Who wrote it? Who sponsored it? If it's for a product and it's about the efficacy of the product, well, if it's being backed by the product that you're reading about, it's biased. So of course it's in favor of what you're reading in the first place. So we really have to pull back and look at, where is our information sourced from?
Right.
And is it something that is it from a place that really actually is using the scientific method? Was there a hypothesis that came into place? Was there controls? Was there variables? What were they? And what was the outcome? And over what period of time?
Right. Right. That's actually kind of a brilliant thing. We're in a place right now where, with social media, whenever I find something of interest or anything on the internet, what happens is that the information hones in, instead of broadening my scope of knowledge, it actually deepens my scope of knowledge or opinion, whatever it is that you want to say. And once I remember that that's happening, it makes me sad, because I feel like I'm not getting any smarter. And to me, smarter is not always about depth, it's about breadth, right? The breadth of knowledge, so that I can have a conversation with anyone. I mean, the good news is that someone who's connected will always ask questions and will always come with curiosity. But at the same time, there's this honing in. And I'm wondering if that's also something that's challenging this, you know, encompassing or incorporating both faith and science, or let's just say any two things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think it comes back to, like you said, that curiosity. How do we remain curious in being open to ask the questions that bring us down the path to get real information, to get information that's going to bring us to a source of learning without the stuff, without the fluff, but that's going to bring us to a place to learn, to grow.
Fingers crossed on that one.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed on that one. And it's funny that I would say that. One thing that I have found with people, especially having our own businesses, is I find that people really don't care what your faith is. They just want results. And the part that interests me, one of my favorite coaches, it didn't work out not because of what they did, but that my interest was not in real estate coaching, but rather in having a small business, right? Building my small business and not real estate. And he's Christian based. And we actually had a conversation on this. And I said, I'm having a really hard time being a realtor as well as being this intuitive worker because I feel like people are going to judge me, which was it was honest, especially for at the time. And I still have a little bit of fear sometimes. And he said, you know what, Cinthia, people, they don't care. They want results. And he says, I don't hide he goes, that I'm Christian based and that my business is Christian based. And he says, people don't care. Mm-hmm. He says, what they see is that there are people that I'm helping, that I have things of value. And then he says, and that there is a spirituality there. Mm-hmm. And that actually makes them feel better, that there's a spirit or an ideal beyond everything like that. Do you see other businesses starting to be like that? Or are you feeling that the trend, because I believe you are very like that you are very faith-based in everything you do. And even when you say ass, that, it's in everything you say.
Yeah. And I don't think really, if you are living authentically, I don't think you can separate it and put it on a shelf. And I know that I think I tried when I opened my business because people knew me as who I used to be as a pastor in the former organization. And I very much wanted to separate myself from that persona. And it took me a while to separate myself from the organization, but still come back to me in who I was in my faith. Not hiding my faith, because my faith is very much who I am. I'm still a pastor. I'm still who I am. I have this wonderful business that I get to do amazing things and walk alongside people doing amazing things in transforming what they want to do. But I don't shove my faith down anyone's throat in any way. That would never be my intention. But it's the cornerstone of who I am in a lot of the foundations of my business. I mean, love, integrity, communication. I mean, where would that not be in anyone's faith?
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I have one final question for you.
All right, lay it on me.
All right. It's not a big one, but I kind of crack up when people say that they are heart-centered or they have a heart-based business. What I'd like to know is, in your opinion, is there a difference between heart-based and faith-based? And if there is a difference, what is it?
I have no idea what that means. I hear that all the time. And, honestly, I wouldn't even say faith-based. I look at my business based on a set of values.
Right.
And like I said, it's love, integrity, communication, and growth.
Right.
Would really be the 4 pillars. I probably have about 7 or 8 written down that form my full mission. But I think it's really, when we look at it, it's what guides us,
Mm-hmm.
guides our businesses, whatever that is.
So really, regardless, at the end of the day, it's values,
Yeah,
right? It's a value-based business, and I believe that's where all the good stuff comes from.
yeah. You can call it heart, you can call it faith, but I think at the end it's a reflection of who you are and your values.
Right, right. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. The time just flew by. I'm a little bit sad that it flew by so quickly. I, I was so, hold on. I'm so happy that I got to spend time with you. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you. It's always great to chat with you.
Yeah. Oh, you got anything coming up that you want to shout out about?
Oh, let's see here. Keep an eye on my social media and website. I will be announcing in January the early bird pricing for my San Francisco retreat that will be coming up in 2023. So
Woo!
keep your eyes out for that.
That sounds great. Stephanie's information will be in the show notes. And speaking of heads up, just a quick reminder that you are listening to It's All Connected with Cinthia Varkevisser and Michelle Walters. And we are going through a brand change. So, very shortly, we will be coming up podcasting as Mind Power Meets Mystic. I know. All right. Thank you so very, very much. And we will chat again really soon. Bye.